in a somewhat informal setting, and we will do so with an interview with Professor Eviatar Matania. The interview will be, we will have discussion for, I guess, 40-45 minutes, and thereafter we will open it up to conversations and questions. And if people have urgent questions and business during, so of course we will be happy to hear your interventions. And we really thank Eviatar for joining us this evening. So there's a saying in Aramaic that doesn't translate so well to English of someone that's Safra and Saifa, and I think about Eviatar as Safra and Saifa. Safra means book. Eviatar is a man of books. He completed several degrees with distinction, also PhD at the Hebrew University, and was part of the Talpiot program. He was head of the Talpiot program, and of course, books is only partially correct because Eviatar is also a person of numbers, not only words. And Saifa means sword, and Eviatar carried out several roles in Israeli military, and again, sword maybe doesn't properly describe what he did, because a lot of what he did was not only sword, but I would say even shield. So Eviatar now is a professor in Tel-Aviv University, no one's perfect, but in the School of Political Science and Government and International Affairs. And prior to that, in addition to his governmental and military roles, Eviatar actually had a key role in setting up the Israeli Cyber Directorate, had previous names. So he was the founder, he was the first Director General, and he was the key person to build this entity to what it is today, a very dominant entity internationally in this world. So Eviatar, good evening, thank you for joining us. But today, we'll talk also about something, talk about what you did and what you're doing. But what you're going to do is you're heading an initiative on issues of AI. You want to do to AI what you did to cyber, in a good way, of course, to show how government could take a proactive role in promoting this new idea in many capacities, especially in an academic and research capacity. So Eviatar, let's start with a question. What brings you to AI now? We had AI for so many years. Helen showed us Aliza and showed us Marvin Minsky. Why is now a good time to come to AI?
Thank you and good evening. No doubt that AI is here with us for several decades, but what happened during the last decade is, I would like to call it the cyber phenomenon. And usually I try to compare the cyber phenomenon to the Industrial Revolution, because I believe that we live in an era, in a post-industrialization era. And I would like to call it the cyber or the cyber and big data era, meaning that it's going to change our life, our social life. It's going to change economy, national security. And usually when people think about cyber, the connotation is to something bad, to hackers, to cyber threat, to cyber attacks. But it is just part of what we are talking about. The cyber threat is just part of the cyber phenomenon, which is, again, from my point of view, is a new era for humanity. Now, the cyber and big data enables AI technologies and AI data-oriented technology to really do something different than we used to during the last several decades. And that's why AI becomes so important in our lives during the last several years, and is going to dominate technologies during the coming decades.
So Eviatar, do you think it's the reason you're moving forward is a social, a technological reason, a political reason? What do you think is the key for now taking action?
From the government point of view, I simply believe that I will try to, again, to give an example. Suppose you live in the end of the 19th century, and you're trying to predict or to understand how life is going to be during the 20th century. Think about economy, think about society, think about national security, about everything. If you try to really imagine how the 20th century looked like, I don't believe that anyone could have done it during the 19th century, because everything would change because of the Industrial Revolution, everything that we know. And I think that we currently live in the beginning of the cyber era, meaning that everything is going to be changed. That's why the whole issue of the new technology is the same as the steam engine has changed everything that we know during the 20th century. I think that AI technologies, data-driven AI technologies, data-oriented AI technologies, because there are also other AI technologies, composed with the cyber phenomenon, which is the cyber phenomenon, again, from my point of view, is the combination of the total connectivity, the computerized systems, and the ability to take it into people. This combination of AI technologies, AI-driven data technologies, and the cyber phenomenon are going to change everything. So from my point of view, it is everything: national security, economy, and society.
Oh, great. So before, Courtney and Helen, they mentioned a few dystopic views of AI. They talked about Marvin Minsky. They pointed to Elon Musk. Given your interest in moving this forward, what do you think of all these fears and dystopic views of AI? Do they scare you? Do certain elements scare you? Do you find some of the threats and dystopic views irrelevant?
It is very difficult to predict. But again, I will go to the past. And I think that you all know that the Industrial Revolution brought us a lot of positive issues. But in the same way, they also brought us, for example, the Second World War, which was the industrialized war that we have ever had, with 50 million people killed, with everything different that we knew in the past about war. So I think that the same will happen with the cyber phenomenon and AI technologies. I think there are big advantages, and I fear some of them.
In terms of maybe beyond dystopia, how do you think maybe AI will change social structures?
So, again, I'm very careful. I do not like to predict, but I would like to point towards several issues. For example, technologists. Just try to currently view the salaries of engineers and scientists, and I'm not talking about social scientists, but about technologists. Just look at the salaries in Israel, in the States, in Europe, and the salaries of others. We are establishing a new class of people. So the same as the Industrial Revolution established or created the middle class and the workers. For example, now we are creating a new class of people that are going to be in demand, are going to have much better salaries than others. And this is something which is going to change everything that you know about work, about employment, about workers, about what people are going to study. This is just an example of how it's going to change our social life. Other examples are, as were mentioned here, so I don't want to repeat, but for example, risks for democracy, like the social scoring in China, it's not just China. I will give you an example of Israel, from Israel, which I'm going to talk about in 2 weeks in a conference in Tel Aviv. Israel has decided to have a credit a database governed by the government, not a private one, of all its citizens. Now, no one wanted it because one wants to really have surveillance of people. No. Everything is economical driven. But if you ask me, this is an example of something that we start now because we think, oh, it will be very good for competition about credit, and we are all against the banks. But as soon as we have such a mandatory database, which everyone should be there, I think it will start something new. And someone mentioned here that we will be treated not as people, but as numbers. So I believe maybe that the credit score of each citizen in Israel will start describing us. If we can really take not just a loan, but to have new houses and other things. And you know, things are starting, you know where it starts, you never know where it ends. So this is just, for example, risk from my point of view to our democracy, to our autonomous, to everything.
So I'll take you for a few minutes back to your military service. Many of the fears that are related to AI, also this is impacted by science fiction, they relate to military uses. What do you think of these fears and what can be done to perhaps mitigate them if needed?
So I have to admit that I truly understand the fears from AI in military use, but again, from my point of view, I feel more from from things that are going to change our society and economy. Because, and if you ask me, we will see the risks, we will mitigate challenges in our society well before we will see them in military. It will take time for military to really give some vehicle to decide if to kill or not to kill, if to do this or not to do this. But we'll see it first in our cars, in our algorithms, in our banks, in social scoring. We'll see, and all the challenges, we are going to confront them in our social and civil life, I believe, much before we will see them in military use. And that's why I think that we should focus on and try to really confront and solve the problems of our civil life before we go to the military and try to change them. Military used to kill people, and they will do that either ways, here or there. But when I'm going through a train and it's going to affect my life, or the social scoring, everything, and to change my behavior, I fear it much more than what military is going to do with it.
I'm going to push you a bit more on that because we see in the last, since the dawn of man, we see that military uses are actually driving innovation in certain directions, and in many instances are ahead of other areas. And I think your context, the cyber context, is a key one. Where we saw military uses and even innovation coming from the military. So in view of that history, don't you think that it will be the military driving AI innovation, and that will be where we should be worried about first, and then the other issue?
So I do agree. I would like to differentiate between military pushing algorithms and innovation and military pushing other things. Yes, some of the innovation also comes from military use, yes, not everything. So both in cyber and in AI, I believe that will be some new algorithms, innovation coming from from the military, but also from civilian use and innovation, which you can see among the Silicon Valley or in Israel and other places in the world, in China. And not everything will come from the military, but of course, usually when the military needs something, for example, in SIGINT organization, which were mentioned here, so they were the first to use cyberspace for intelligence, for example, but other innovative spirits were also we could find in civilian market, and they drove it also. Talking about our fears, again, I think that my most fears are not lying in what the military is going and how it's going to use it, but what civilians are going to do with it, what the governments are going to do with that, what global companies are going to do with everything. I can tell you that's my real fears. Yes, and militaries will also take it from me. And just one example for something that, again, was mentioned here. People here talked, some lecturers, about the fact that, for example, so the US is not going to have surveillance about its citizens, and the same we know about privacy and everything. And it reminds me of the biometric issue. Everyone, each and every country and nation states collect the data about other citizens of other nations because you need a visa, because you want to enter our borders, because of intelligence. So everyone is collecting about everyone except of our citizens. So don't worry. All your information is in the hands of someone. Maybe not your government, but in the hands of other governments as well.
So let's maybe, instead of looking at the dystopic view, maybe look at the positive view and view of the military and your new project. And maybe now is a good time for you to explain to the crowd who might not know it, how you envision moving AI forward in Israel, and also maybe tie into that why you think this is important to Israel and important also to the IDF. And in the past, it was quite intuitive to me why cyber is important for Israel, for the IDF, because of defensive mechanisms, the offensive mechanisms, which we could not talk about now, but it's quite intuitive. But when I think about Tzal, IDF, Israeli intelligence, I don't see the connection to AI so clearly. So why is it so important for you to push money and resources into that at this juncture?
So first, I'm not representing the IDF, as you know. I hardly represent the government of Israel, let's say, because I was nominated for that, and I'm just a year ago was part of it. But I can, I will tell this story. Currently, you can see around the world two races for digital superiority. One is between the US, European Union, and China regarding superiority, the digital superiority focused on economical driven, and society. The second one is more a military race for digital superiority, which we sometimes call cyber superiority, which is between the US, Russia, and China, not the European Union. So there are two big races. Now, we had to ask ourselves almost a year ago where Israel and how Israel is going to position itself in this race. And we understand that if we really want to be one of the powers in the world, a high-tech power, the same as we now, and to do the same in AI technologies as we did with cyber technologies, and we became one of the cyber powers, and I would like to emphasize we are not a great power in cyber. There are only three great powers, the United States, Russia, and China, but we find ourselves a power behind them, and we are responsible for 20% out of the world private investment, which Israel in cyber. So we asked ourselves, what is going to be with AI. And we understand that unlike the United States, for example, we cannot leave everything to the free market. We are a very small country. We cannot compete with the budgets, nor with United States budget, European Union, or China. But we can sometimes use the disadvantage of being so small as an advantage because, for example, we can put in one room decision makers for government, for the security forces, from the academy, our industry, and to generate a national plan. So what we did is we recommended the Prime Minister, who approved our recommendation and nominated me and Professor Ben Israel to lead a team to recommend to the government about a national plan of how to become an AI power, an AI, more I call it more smart or wise systems, which includes all the AI technologies. And the emphasis on what is critical for Israel that we need, otherwise we are not going to be there. Second, not what's critical, but where we have advantages over the world and we can put budgets and efforts and to lead and to build it as an economical power in Israel. And third, which national plans, and I not mean 100 points of recommendation, but which 3 to 5 plans national plans can really take us to there. This is the objective of the team that we are currently leading.
So, Eviatar, a few times you said the word power, and maybe you could explain to the audience a bit. First of all, why is it important for Israel to be a power? Is it even realistic that we see ourselves as a small country? Can we even be seen as a power? And finally, how does leadership in AI lead us to a position of power?
Is it realistic? So first I hope so. So the same question was almost a decade ago regarding cyber. How Israel may compete with all the powers in the world. And I think that through a very interesting ecosystem of universities, and we are here in part of this ecosystem, and industry and governmental resolutions, we were unable to really create and to bring Israel into being one of the powers because of a really interesting ecosystem, not just from the technological point of view, but also from the strategical point of view. We are one of the few in the world that have an holistic strategy of what to do with cyber. And part of the strategy is where to focus, where not to focus, what to do and what not to do. Because decision makers sometimes, and the most difficult questions are what not to do and where not to be, but trying to put it, to view it from a holistic point of view. But since I'm not talking about cyber, I take it just as an example. So AI. AI is important because we believe that most of the future of this world is going to be based on AI technologies. If we want to be part of this future with our economy, with our national security, we need to be a power in AI. So this is the future of our high-tech arena. This is the future of our economy. If people do not know, almost 50% of Israeli export is high-tech export, which is much different than other countries in the world. So the high-tech is responsible for our economy, important and critical for our national security, and is an engine to change our society. AI is the future of high-tech. We need to be there.
So you mentioned the previous venture and the future current venture, the cyber experience that we're part of here in our center, and AI. What differences, what's similar in perhaps moving this forward? Do you think it's going to be more difficult or easier?
It is different because cyber stood for two issues. One is technologies, and the second one is security, national security, cybercrime. So we had to build also structures in order to mitigate cyber threats, and this came from these 2 points of view: security and I call it economy and technology. AI is technology. There is no AI threat. AI is technology. So it is different. I am not going to establish a cyber directorate, which is responsible from cover to cover for the defense of the nation in cyber. So we need to find different ways and different structures.
An AI directorate.
What?
An AI directorate.
I'm not going to establish an AI directorate, no. This will not be part of our accommodations, but you are right. We need to also figure out which structures to build and how to build the governmental structure in order to lead and what to do. So this is technology. Technology that is changing everything. So it's different from the cyber. And sometimes, in Israel, it is easier to push issues which have some security notion. It's easier because national security is important. It is easier to convince the prime minister and the government. It's easier to receive budgets. It's easier to do things. So with talking only about technology, everything is very clear, but we need some different attention in order to push it. But again, we know how to do that and how to put it also from national security point of view and why it is so important.
So we're sitting here in academia as part of our operations of our cyber center, and Eva, the director, and myself, we were engaged in a very long negotiation with the cyber directorate, with Eviatar and others, to set up our center. And it was clear from Eviatar and from Tal, and it was before predecessor of Einan, that there is an objective of promoting academia in cyber. Is this something you think needs to be done in AI as well? Do you think you need to take a role in promoting academia, maybe pointing academia in a specific direction, or perhaps this is something that business has a more dominant role?
First, you are right. It took some time to establish this center because of the bureaucracy of University of Haifa. Because we, the government, knew how to move very fast, as you know, with other centers. But we succeeded. So regarding AI, I'm more than sure that we need universities and academia to be inside and to lead in knowledge, in understanding, not just technological issues, but social issues, other challenges, ethics, legislation, everything, regulation. Academia needs to lead. I'm sure about it, and I'm sure that our recommendations will be there with academia as one of the leaders. Because if we leave it just to industry, first, I think it will not be in the frontiers of understanding the issues, not the technological ones, not the others, and we are going to live in a world that I don't want to live in. So I want the academia to lead not just from the computer sciences faculties and engineering faculties, but also research centers, as we have here, regarding ethics, legislation, as I mentioned, everything that was mentioned during this day, because I want them also to influence the government. And this is very important. And one of the things that I'm all the time think about is how to build such a structure through which academia will influence what the decision makers in the governments and regulators are going to adopt and to decide in order to build the AI technology in Israel in the right way.
So this is very interesting, and I have to say, I don't think I heard this from you or anyone, that you identify not only a failure, a market failure in industry and market, but a potential failure in governmental decision making, and academia could have a role in closing the gaps in both realms. How do you think is best to link together industry and government and academia in the AI context? Because you know, in academia, we're used to be ignored often.
I have to admit, I don't know yet how exactly to do that, but we'll find the right structure and the win-win situation. It will be not just to close some gaps. The academia should influence, you know, policies. Who in the government is going to understand in AI? Please tell me, in which ministry in Israel, leave other countries, in Israel, in which ministry you find people that understand in AI, in technology, or in ethics, or think about the issue, or know how to regulate it? Try to find. I can give you the answer. I know the government very well. You will not, you can go to a journey. You will not find them.
I don't know if they even have eyes, so AI.
And you not find them because the whole concept of how government is built and its employees does not cope with the frontiers of technology. The cyber, we needed to establish a specific structure so the government will be able to understand, to develop, to build, and to lead. So we need also to do it in AI. But who is going to supervise it? Who is going to really build the policies? Academia. And that's what we are going to do. We need the academia to be there, not to decide. We will have decision makers, but to build their capabilities and capacity in order to do the right things. I'm sure about it. That's what we are going to do.
So Helen Eastenbaum had several slides that she showed us that AI is not only a technological issue, but it's an ethical issue. It's what the ethics specific are is still to be established, but no doubt ethics has to be part of the story. First of all, I'm wondering if you agree. And second, how do we turn this abstract idea into something that's concrete?
AI, from my point of view, is technology. But this technology brings with it challenges in ethics, in legislation, in everything. So with that I agree, but AI again is technology. But I think that the way that we're going to do in this initiative that we have in Israel, one, we have 3 kinds of teams. One, we have 5 teams regarding the 5 technologies that we are focusing on, which is IoT and sensor, quantum computing, data science, autonomous systems, and distributed networks and intelligence. So we have 5 technologies. We also have 4 sectors which we are concentrating on, which is the security, transportation, healthcare, and financials. And then we have the 3rd kind of groups. The leading one in them, from the governmental point of view, the 2 leadings are human capital and ethics legislation. So what I'm expecting from these teams is not to solve the problems. I think it will take years to understand. And I'm afraid of too early regulation, which will be technological or technology-oriented and will not suit future technologies. I'm afraid of legislation right away because it will not be the right one. And we have some examples from the past where we moved too fast and we legislated or regulated and built things that are according to specific knowledge that we knew. We do not know where the world is going towards. What we need, and this team is going to recommend, is how to put a structure of academia and government and maybe other stakeholders which will influence, recommend, and cope with everything which is related to ethics, legislation, fairness, and other things, and will lead the government to the right places. I do not want currently specific recommendations regarding what to do, but the structure which will be here for years, which enable us to understand and to lead.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but just like as a final point, if you see the recommendations come out on the ethical and legal issues, what would you say if something is missing, you would say this missing factor is too much, I'm going to send it back. What kind of such omissions will be crucial, in your opinion, in the work on recommendations on ethics and law? In other words, what do you think is something we must have in this realm?
We need to build a balance between our need to build an economy which is based on AI, side by side with ethical issues which enable us in Israel not to change the way society currently looks like. I call this whole issue democracy, whether it's civil rights, whether this is privacy, or this is democracy from my point of view. I want to see in the recommendations what are the most important issues which we should put along the way in order to keep our democracies. And I don't want to tell them what to really to recommend, but I want to see how you keep democracy. That's a very important issue.
Okay, so I've been asking questions for almost 40 minutes. I'll stop here, and I think many people have questions. But I have to say that coming into this, I don't think I would have expected someone to say that the key ethical issue is linked to democracy, and this is, I think, something that many leaders are understanding at this time, and it's really assuring to see Eviatar is reflecting this very forward-looking position. So if we have questions, please. Please, Nifa.
So, three questions actually. One has to do with going back to Tal's question about the competitive advantage of Israel. You look at AI, and it's an industry that is data-driven, and we are 8 million people. I mean, China is more than a billion. I mean, how can we compete? Unless we change the paradigm, what AI is. But if we still stick to machine learning, this is a very small number. Speaking of that, or just assuming that this is not an advantage, thinking about the way in which the government can collaborate with industry, what do you think about data sharing? How do you think this is something that could be done? Most of the data belongs to government. One of the concerns that we've heard about today is about public-private collaboration that came up again and again, and how dangerous that could be for democracy. But this is a resource from which we actually build these machines, smart machines. Third question has to do with the role, with how to prepare government for AI, and a lot of the focus of this discussion has been on regulation, but I'm also worried about procurement policy, about training of people that have to work with Palantir, right, or with other companies in the private sector, and they don't know how to consult a smart assistant. They don't know what the meaning of what they get, and I think that may require training on behalf of the government in order to make the government user-friendly to AI. So it's not. So I'm curious about your thoughts about other measures of government or strategic preparation of the government beyond regulation.
Okay, regarding competition, and about, you know, the fact that China and Israel together are 1/4 of the world. But China alone is also 1/4 of the world. So you ask how we are going to compete with data. The fact that AI, the new technologies of AI are data-driven, this is a fact. But trying to look at the future, I believe that the real competition will not be on data. The same as fuel during the Industrial Revolution. Fuel is important, and rich countries, because they have a lot of fuels here or there and others, natural gas, for example. But in the past, it was not. It was coal. But the real competition was with the countries that succeeded to be industrialized economies. And these were not, for example, the countries which had more fuel. And I think data is the same. Currently, what we see, in the beginning, Britain became one of the industrial powers because they also had coal, but they became a power because they had the right regime and businesses and everything which really took them to being one of the leading industrialized nations, then United States and others. I think the competition is going to be about algorithms, storage, information, knowledge, wisdom, and not data. Data will be expensive. You will need to buy it. You will need to do something to get to it. But I think that the competition will not be there. And Israel, what Israel has to suggest is the algorithms, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, not data. Regarding the second question about sharing, I think that sharing of data is important, and I would like to see here the government which frees its data after doing some, the right things and technologies, so it will not be identifying data. But I think it's very important that the government will take all its data for universities, by the way, for research, but also for the industry and others. Yes, I think it's important, and it's going to be part of our recommendations. And third thing, regarding governments, I usually try to differentiate between what I call tactics and strategies. We are making a lot of mistakes during our journeys. And, once I sat with the Prime Minister, and he gave his view about the cyber, and then, he's an English speaker, and he wanted to say something, and said, and he then saw us, how do you say, מתארגנים בתנועה? It came to him from the army. So we are changing our way according to what we see. This is strategy. Strategy is not a work plan, is to have some, objectives and to play our cards. And why this is my answer? Because I'm afraid from the credit database, because it's a strategy. I can see no one closing it. But the fact that people will make mistakes and will not understand, and procurement processes will look like this or like this, we will change and correct everything. So what I usually try to figure out, where are the strategic moves which we should choose the right way, other things we will correct.
Helen.
Actually, the question I had was very much near this about data. Maybe one of the reasons China can take this on is because they have so many people. And then I thought your answer was really on the nose, and so this is actually just an observation having spoken to someone recently who was from one of the Israeli HMOs, and saying that there's a big push in Israel to use AI and data science to produce medical knowledge and better treatment and so on. And it was interesting that in the US, this area, of course, it's advancing everywhere, but in the the difference between what I could see in Israel and in the US is that the health system incentivizes a certain kind of behavior on the part of the HMOs, which, per claim and shoot from them, engenders greater trust by the people who belong to them, and not freaking out when these parties say, okay, we're going to pull all the data and do sort of analytics,
right.
we're going to produce all sorts of services. Whereas in the US, there's a kind of adversarial relationship, first of all, between the patients and the companies who are now increasingly controlling the caregiving. And then also competition among the different companies to hold the data close to their chest,
right.
and not to collaborate. And so I'm just sort of reinforcing in just this little case that and because there's so many now touch points with health, wearables and whatnot. In fact, it's not necessarily about how many people, but how many touch points. And, as you said, the system that incentivizes a kind of collaborative attitude between the data subjects. And that's just not something that I see happening. So that's an observation.
You're so right with some things that you have mentioned. I have a long answer, so I try to make it very short, just to mention very briefly issues. One, which also relates to what Niv asked and you said regarding data, you should also understand most of the time we do not need so big a lot of data. For AI algorithms, all the time you do not need 1 billion people. You do not need them. Sometimes tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or few millions are enough for everything. The fact that there are those who are trying to really have data about everyone is not because of research, algorithms, and knowledge, but in order to control. And this is the difference. When I'm talking about AI, knowledge, and algorithms, I know that I don't need 1 billion people inside it in order to have the right understandings of what's going on. No in healthcare, no in other. I don't need 1 billion. You want 1 billion when you want to control them or to really have the information about a specific person, about everyone. For research, for understandings, for new knowledge, you do not need all of them. You need much less data. And this is something very important to understand. So part of the race for more and more data is not because they needed to have better solutions, understandings, but to rule, to control, and to influence more people in business, or it is business-like or governmental-like. Now, my second question is what you talked about is regime. Michal here is suggesting that the differences in regimes around the world are going to be a critical issue in our capability to be an AI power. So if we limit and bound the ability to store, to share, how the competition is going to look like and what to do with the data, this will be a problem, much greater problem than if we have less or more data, from my point of view. And I think that what I care for is the regime that is going to be in Israel. This is why I think that sharing of data and the whole healthcare structure is very important in what we are doing.
So, my question is about what you said about regulation. I agree about getting it right. But then my question would be, if we wait and see and take time with that process, and regulation
AI now.
Yeah. Again, if we go too fast to legislation, we may lose the competition and we may not be in the right place. So usually my recommendation is to have, for example, I like soft regulation, which means recommendations, best practices. That's what we prefer. That's what we think is the right thing to do. We, you know, and governments and academias and norms and some agreements between different stakeholders may sometimes influence much more than legislation and tough regulation. Usually when you regulate or when you legislate, you go to the minimum bar. And I prefer currently, and also in the future, to be in a world where we have some agreements, we have best practices, we recommend to global companies, we expect them to behave in a specific way, we will put it on the table where they do not do the right things. I think it might influence in a better way, and it will not bound us to specific technologies or legislation which is so difficult to change.
Yafit, you want to start?
I wanted to follow up on the regime point, because it's not just about how these systems will be implemented. It's also, you hear the claim that, and you just pointed to that regulations stifle innovation. We hear this claim all the time. And the question is whether having regimes that do not care about democratic values would actually put them in this race that you described in a better position, as opposed to Western democracies that care about different democratic values and have to place regulation to safeguard them. So what do you think about that from the race perspective, from the technological perspective?
Well, you're right. It is easier for non-democratic regimes to cope with the technologies if they do not care for human rights, democracy, and other issues. But you know, once one of the top executives in our Shin Bet, our internal security service, told me, you know, the fact that I need to follow some very important rules, and rules are not just legislation, but also other rules and instructions, leads me to to be innovative and to be better. So I don't want a bounding regulation, but I do think that we will find the right creative and innovative ways of you know, of overcoming the problems. But I prefer to live in such a democratic country, but to balance the issues and to wait a little with the legislative regulation, but to bound. And I know I have some difficulties and disadvantages, but I think we can be creative, but not go to you know, to too difficult regulation right away. Wait, we do not understand the world.
We had a few more questions.
Yeah, I'm just thinking aloud with you, okay? Putting together some of the things that have come up. Small economy means we have less natural data. I mean, naturally, we have less data. Okay, so in order to overcome this comparative advantage, because we need some minimum of data, which it might be that a small economy needs to put more emphasis on cleaning the data, on organizing the data, on sharing the data, on even data standardization to some point. So maybe this is the kind of regulation that we need more than maybe a large economy needs?
Oh, yes, I do agree. I think that being so small, some of our creativity should be in, okay, we are going now to make a market which will be easier to share data, and really the government will help and support and will be the first to do it, for example. Yes, I do agree with that. And you know, as soon as we do it, we have enough data for all the research and what we want to do.
Yoram?
I want to
refer to your comment about the employment market. It's not just that currently we face two economies in Israel, and there are people who are getting high salaries and people who are getting low salaries, but if you look at AI, it will affect the whole population in the sense that most of the people do not understand what it is at all. So what is the role, what can be done in the sense of communicating this revolution to the people and to put people into the employment market? So it was just an example. The technologist is looking at it to understand that we have a new class. That's what I tried to, just as an example. From my point of view, education. Starting in the age of 6 in elementary school, education. In Israel, you should, from the age of 6, should study not just Hebrew, but also English and the language with the computer sciences, meaning from the beginning. And the same as we educate for other, cultural issues that we care for, I think that it should be part of it. Now, I do not want everyone to be a technologist, but to have the intuition. The intuition, you can lead and be part of it if you have the right intuition. For example, I think about a new BA in universities, which we can, please do not duplicate, which we can, teach almost everything, but without putting, technology. I do not need to use mathematical equations in order to teach cyber, for example, or game theory, or AI. There will be those who will study, who will learn it through and will be technologists, but other people can be still product managers, product managers, and work in the high-tech arena. They just need the intuition, the analytic capabilities. So I think that through education and investing in human capital, we can do a lot.
So I'm going to take the prerogative to ask the last question. Eviatar, you've been a person that's always been a forward-looking thinker, and I'm sure that when you were in the cyber realm, you already were thinking about AI. So what is, Eviatar, the great project that you're going to be engaged in after AI? I want to get in and take positions already.
Oh, thank you for this. I think first let us close the issue and recommend the government. I think that the most, the more difficult challenge will be not the recommendations, but the right framework and public policy for the government and how to build it as a win-win framework for Israel and to adopt it. This will be, after this challenge, we can talk again.
So I want to thank very much Professor Eviatar Matania. I want to thank the audience that stayed so late, all of our speakers, our partners, Hebrew University, and of course, Yoni, Lily, and the entire team for setting this up. Thank you very much.